Hey, it's Drybear. Today we're talking about Chromanium in a continuation of our Lost Ark Guardian Raid guide series. He is the 5th Guardian Raid you'll encounter and is the first Guardian Raid after you complete the Rohendel questline and reach eye level 460. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. We're going to split this guide up into 2 parts. The first part will be a short TLDR version for people that just want to know what are the gotcha mechanics that you have to be aware of before you go in, and I'll figure out the rest myself. And then we'll go into a longer form version afterwards in the second part that go into how to read his movement patterns, his behaviors, how to read his abilities, and how to punish him the best. Let's start with the TLDR version. The first thing you're going to notice is he has a shell when you first enter. You'll see it flash when you deal impairment or destruction damage to it. And your goal is to break this shell to remove the damage reduction that he has on him. In fact, the first time he goes down, you will deal increased damage to him as well. So you want to make sure that you're only using your destruction and your impairment or stagger abilities when you first come in and meet him, so he breaks his shell. He will regenerate it if he moves platforms, but once you get it the first time, at least on this Chromanium, you'll be good to go. Chromanium is also a great guardian to learn well because he has different variants in the game. There's a Chromanium in tier 2, Lava Chromanium, and there's an Ice Chromanium in tier 3 as well. And they share move sets and patterns, so once you know this Guardian Raid very well, you'll be benefiting from it later on in the game. Now, I'll leave you to figuring out his mechanics as you go along, as they're all relatively straightforward and self-explanatory. There's 2 for the TLDR that you'll want to know about that you wouldn't really know about until you went into it. The first is his stun orb. He has 2 different kinds of artillery shots that he fires from his back. One is orange or red, and the other is blue. And the blue one, instead of dealing damage when it lands, it will slow you. And then if you get hit by the orb that it spawns, it will stun you and anyone else caught in the area. So you just have to avoid the blue when it lands. And then when someone gets targeted by the orb, they just need to run around until it times out. And then you're fine with that mechanic. And the second gotcha mechanic for Chromanium for our TLDR version is going to be his 2 stomp variants. The first one, he will put his feet down on the ground, plant them, start sucking energy from the earth, and then do a big AoE stomp afterwards. So you'll see him doing it right here. He actually starts drawing energy into his feet. And when he does this, he's about to do a kind of small but very scary stomp and land around. So if you're a melee character, make sure you're not in range. But what we want to look for is right after he does this is to see if he does a follow-up. So if he lands and whoever he's targeting is in range or he wants to go again, he will do the follow-up, which means that he's about to do a much larger AoE. And this is usually the one from Chromanium that gets people the most. So you'll see that right here, we start to back up a lot more than we were. Is because when he does this second stomp, he'll stomp once for an inner radius and then he'll stomp again for where this floating rock is and do a major AoE. So as soon as if you see him do the follow-up on that stomp, just get as far away as you can. Once it's done, and then you can get back in. But you can see it is a big killer if you're not aware that it's this big of a radius when you land. And that is it for Chromanium TLDR. Everything else that he does is straightforward. You can just figure out, don't stand in bad and avoid the hits. So let's move on to our longer form version on how to best beat Chromanium. Now let's talk about his counter. All Guardian Raids have a counter where they glow blue. If you hit them with an ability that has counter on it, you will stop them, stun them, and knock them down for a short time. His is very easy to read. He will lean back and put his shoulders back. So he starts to lurch back, stand up on his hind legs, and then he'll fall straight down. And until his belly reaches near the ground, he is fully counterable from the front. It does do a little AoE damage in front of him that you want to avoid. But if you have a counter available and you see him going back on his hind legs, you'll want to just go ahead and hit him with the counter and then we'll drop him to the ground. Now let's talk about his ranged attacks. On his back, kind of like a baby Blastoise, he's got this artillery system that fires the blue orbs that we talked about earlier, but also more red orbs on the ground, these artillery strikes. There's a few versions you'll run into and you'll see that he's about to do it by his posture. So you'll actually see him stand up, move his front legs backwards, and fire, and it'll glow on his back what color it's going to be before he fires it. So right here on the top, you'll see that this orb glows on his back. If it's red, you know it's going to be a damaging attack. If it's blue, it's going to be the slowing, stunning attack. He also does as you can see here, he moves his front 2 feet backwards. It stands up and then actually gets this kind of arch where he puts his head up and his feet behind him. So it's almost like he's standing more erect, and then he fires. So if you ever see him kind of lean his weight back, you know he's about to fire an artillery strike. And he has 2 different versions. The one that you just saw there is this normal fire shot. It does an AoE around him. He's targeting someone for this attack. So just know that that target might be you, or if everyone's standing in the same spot, it could just be that you're all gonna get hit by it. This one does a good amount of damage and knocks back if you are in the area, so just be aware of it. He also does a flurry of attacks, a barrage, generally usually when you first encounter him, and then he'll periodically do it throughout the fight. You'll know he's doing this by the fact that he fires and there's a delay before anything lands on the ground. So he'll rear up like he does for an attack, fire, nothing shows up immediately, and then you'll see a bunch of small little orbs. And these actually knock you down when they land on you, and they're pretty random. So you just want to be aware of your feet, where you're standing. And when you see this attack, just kind of move around until you get a chance to attack him. He also has 2 frontal breath attacks, one that goes straight from his mouth and one where he'll do a progressive breath from left to right, breathing in an area. One where he breathes from left to right, you'll see his feet move backwards as he tries to set up for it. So he'll actually take his feet here, move it backwards and step backwards. Then you'll see him shake his head and then he'll breathe forward. And this one again starts on his left and continues all the way around to his right. And it goes a pretty fair distance apart. So if you ever see him start to kind of shake his head a little bit and run his feet back, you know he's gonna do the left to right. What's confusing about it is he starts with his head facing forward, and then when he's ready to breathe, you'll see the energy going into his mouth. When he's ready to breathe, he'll then turn his head to his left and then breathe there first. So don't be standing directly to the left of him, or if you see him do this, you can just go to his right, and then he'll do the breath from left to right, and you're good to go on that. Once you get him into phase 2, which happens after you break his shell, he'll then start doing forward jumps. This one is a good one to learn how to read because the other Chromaniums also do this. And so once you learn how to read it, it can be a lot easier to get out of the way. So what he'll do when he's about to jump is he'll take a very wide stance. You'll actually see him right here. He'll bring his feet forward, and then he'll actually just take these and spread them out a little bit and then lean down. And when he's about to do that, almost like he's bringing his head closer to the floor, that means he's about to jump once or twice, depending on where you're standing and the RNG of his moveset. He'll put a wide stance and jump forward, do an AoE around where it is, and then he'll do a double jump. And so you just want to be away from the front of him. He can do this many times in a row, especially if he's low on HP in phase 2 or phase 3. So just be wary that when he spreads it out, he's about to jump, and you want to be away from the AoE that he gets when he lands. He will also periodically do side stomps, either to the left or the right. Will he use both his left feet or both his right feet to stomp if you're on that side of him. The area that this lands on is actually pretty easy to predict, and oftentimes he'll do them back to back. So if we look at this again, you'll see him set up for the stomp. He'll basically just pick up his front foot and then his back foot, and then he'll look to stomp the area. If he uses his tail as a guide, there's a little bit of an area that's right behind him. So if he's lifting up here and you see his tail here, you're gonna get an AoE size like right about here. So if you're behind him doing a back attack damage or your back attack class, just make sure that you're kind of a little bit past the halfway point on his back, and then this side attack won't hit you. And then when he alternates legs and does the other side, you can just move slightly to the other side. You can see how when he started it, I moved from here to there. And then when he alternates, you'll see me move back as well, just to make sure that I don't get caught in that side attack. He'll also do an orb spawn. If you ever see him lean forward and roar for a long period of time, he'll spawn these 4 orbs in cardinal directions around him. Or if you think about the clock, it's 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock, or north, south, east, west. In phase 1 and 2, these orbs just deal pulsing damage to make sure you don't stand in them. But in phase 3, they will be a mixture of blue and red, which means they will actually draw you in. So there's a little bit of a vortex CC element to it. So just make sure you're staying away from these and avoiding the damage. And that's it for Chromanium. He's a very simple fight, very punishing, as are most of the Guardian raids if you don't know what's going on if you ever faced him. But he's one of the easier bosses in the game once you have a clear understanding of what he does and how the game itself works. For a quick recap, make sure you break his shell when you first encounter him using destruction and stagger mechanics. Once it's broken, you will remove the damage reduction that he has on him, and when he falls to the ground, anytime you have a full takedown on him, you'll deal increased damage. So save damaging abilities for when the shell is broken, and try to save up your buff windows and damage windows for when he's on the ground, laying full down. And be wary of the blue orbs that stun. Make sure you avoid his AoE stomp when you see him draw in energy to his feet. The second stomp is far more dangerous than the first. If you ever see him draw in for the second time, just get good distance from him and you'll avoid the stone circle from him. And that's Chromanium. He is weak to fire, so if you ever want to bring flame grenades, you can do that as well if you're looking for other items. And then obviously, since he is heavily reliant on destruction and stagger, destruction bombs, which bring weak point level 3 destruction, corrosive bombs, which bring weak point level 1 destruction, as well as whirlwind grenades for stagger, help break that shell early on and give you that damage window if you're ever facing him in the hard mode format. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.